Let's welcome in Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Thank you so much for your time. So, of course, you in Manhattan for us. Give us the latest in terms of what is happening there at the moment. Of course, this is the moment that many Americans have been waiting for. One can only imagine the climate where you are at this point in time.
Unati, we have finally reached the beginning of the end. The election day in the United States arriving on the East Coast initially. You will recall that there are about 6 time zones in the United States. So we start early on the East Coast, places like New York, places like North Carolina, places like Florida, Massachusetts, Maine, and Georgia, which is one of the key swing states. And given the time zones here, we'll see a ripple effect all the way to places like Alaska and Hawaii that will close in South Africa's Wednesday, essentially. And so what you see is you will see voters turn out at various polling stations around the country to add to the almost 75 million votes that happened during the early voting period across the United States. And the estimation is that if things go well for either candidate here, either a Donald Trump or a Kamala Harris, we could get a result as early as Tuesday night in the United States, sometime early Wednesday morning in South Africa. But if the polls are accurate and the margins are very tight, we could be counting days into the rest of this week. And so lots to play for. We saw the candidates holding multiple rallies in key swing states overnight. Kamala Harris concluding her campaign with a huge rally in Philadelphia, in the swing state of Pennsylvania, after making multiple stops in that state on Monday. Donald Trump was in North Carolina, he was in Pennsylvania, and then he ended in Grand Rapids, Michigan last night, making their final case to the voters and hoping that that slither of independent, the slither of undecided voters will move into their column as they make their marks on their ballots later today.
And I mean, Sherwin, it's been an electrifying, I think, campaign from both parties up to the last day. We saw, of course, Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania last night. Just talk to us about the significance then of her choosing that destination, that crucial state for her final rally.
Yeah, and I guess the question really becomes, what have been the closing arguments from these campaigns? Have they closed strongly, or have they, dissipated the message they seek to present to voters? We saw Donald Trump last night in Grand Rapids, Michigan, making his case. He has made the economy, immigration, border security central themes of his campaign. And what you heard from Harris again last night was that this was a vote for freedom, this was a vote for reproductive rights, for abortion access across the United States. And the real question becomes, what are going to be the issues that drive voters to the polls, given that this is a very diverse electorate? What initial data is showing us in some of the polling that we have seen in terms of the early vote is that women have been breaking 54% in terms of turnout to men's 44% in the early voting. Does that favor Harris? Maybe. Does it favor Trump? We'll have to wait and see. The concern for the Trump campaign, given those numbers, is that they believe they are going to get the majority of the male vote in this country. So if the male vote is trailing the female vote, this gender gap, that could hurt Trump in this election. And so Trump has made the immigration situation a central theme of his campaign. At times a very dark message that, this country is on a path of decay, that only Donald Trump can fix it, that we shouldn't be letting illegal immigrants into the country. Very much a centerpiece of his message to voters, while in addition to the economy, high inflation, which has now come down, but that's still a question in terms of the cost of living here in the United States, while Kamala Harris has made abortion rights, protecting America's democracy, access to healthcare, very much themes in her messaging here. The question is, how will the numbers fall? And we'll only get a clear indication of that when polls start closing around 9 p.m. tonight in New York. But as I mentioned, 6 time zones, so we'll see a ripple effect in terms of closures to polling across the United States later today.
And Sherwin, one of the things we didn't touch a lot about is what everyone is calling the TikTok election. And of course, just talking about Gen Z and how the youth are viewing this election, primarily with their crucial standpoints that they want to see from both candidates, like climate change as an example, etc. What can you tell us about how young people have really come out during this time around?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, this is a demographic that doesn't necessarily respond to polling. It's a demographic that doesn't necessarily show up to vote. And the question is, are they going to do this time, right? When we talk about, traditional voters in the United States, it's generally older people, you're 65 plus, that are going to turn out to vote. The question is, young voters don't respond to the polling. So is there a gap in the polling data we have seen in terms of not capturing what you could see in terms of the 18 to 27-year-old category? What are the issues that drive candidates, voters from that demographic? Issues around climate change, issues around reproductive rights, the lack of access to abortion and reproductive rights in certain states could be a key driver. We've seen anecdotally elements of this in previous elections in the aftermath of that Supreme Court decision that undercut the 50-year precedent of a federal right to abortion. And you've seen anecdotally in states like Ohio, in states like Kansas, where when abortion was on the ballot, you saw an overwhelming turnout from women. The question is, are you going to see an overwhelming turnout from young people and women in particular in that 18 to 24 demographic, the TikTok generation? Kamala Harris has talked about a new generation of leadership, that she represents a new generation of leadership. She's 60 years old. Donald Trump is 78 years old. This is his third run for the White House. How do those dynamics play in an electorate as diverse as this one, particularly in that Gen Z demographic? The numbers certainly will be able to tell that story in the hours ahead.
Let's leave it there for now, but thank you so much for that. Of course, Sean Bryce Peace, our correspondent, coming to us live there from Manhattan, New York, with the very latest in this election.